Welcome back to Mission Bound. My name is Tom Elmore, and this is
Mike who?
Mike James, 2004 NBA champ, and we are here talking a little bit about sports, life, and a little bit about leadership. And I'm pretty excited about today's episode, Mike. You know why?
Why?
We're going to kick it off with sports movies. What is your favorite sports movie? Come on, tell me.
Love and Basketball.
Love and Basketball. All right. My movie is, I loved Hoosiers. Did you like Hoosiers?
I mean,
No?
a whole bunch of white guys were running around playing basketball really didn't impress me. I like the movie, the Western Kentucky, beat Kentucky.
I don't even know that movie.
Okay, never mind.
All right, this is not going well, but we'll just keep going anyway. Just keep rolling. One of my favorite sports movies, and it actually opened my mind up to a completely different realm of sports, was Jerry Maguire. And what is the famous, this is a quiz. What is the famous line in the Jerry Maguire movie? What is it?
Show me the money.
So when I watched that movie, that's when I realized that there is always another player than the one that's on the field or the court. And it is the person behind the player called the sports agent.
Yes.
And most of us sit here on our couches on the weekends watching the game or pay-per-viewing it. And we don't understand that there is somebody there getting these athletes the contract, going in and having the hard discussions. And those sports agents are, man, when you get a good one, it changes everything for you. And I wanted to just really quickly today talk about your sports agent, the guy that helped you get your contracts and the guy that walked with you on your journey. Tell us just a little bit about him.
Oh, he was amazing. You know, not only was he an agent, but he was also my friend. And I think that made it different because normally it's mainly just a business relationship, and you really don't spend, most agents don't spend that time and really trying to share and build a relationship with the player. And so what we were able to do outside of just the business, I was able to respect him on the business side, but mainly the respect came from the relationship that we built outside of, negotiating contracts and marketing and all the other components that he has to take care of. And I think that's where our relationship really started to grow.
And so the agent that you're referring to, his name is Bernie Lee.
Yes.
And he started with you. You went with him. You guys were on this journey together. And he kept going, right? Once your career was done, right?
Yes.
And he actually helped negotiate a max contract from a player named Jimmy Butler, right?
Yes.
Who's also from Houston area, right?
Yes, of course.
And that was like $100 million contract.
And and I think that's what all agents are looking for. They all look for that player that can get them that major deal. He grew with me, but I wasn't a big time player. So it was like, he knew that I had the heart. He knew I had the work ethic. But at the same time, the front office really didn't look at me as a first or second string player. They looked at me as a third or fourth string player. And because of that, he's trying to sell me to these to the front office guys. And he's like, listen, this guy is really good. And I respected how hard he went. And I know he was going hard. The funny thing, my wife would always be like, what is Bernie doing? How come nobody's calling? And I'm like, baby, you don't understand. Bernie is trying to sell ice to an Eskimo right now. And it ain't really as easy as, as it's supposed to be. But at the same time, I got to learn and respect what he was doing based off the fact of how hard he was going, even though it was a hard route.
The idea and the role of a sports agent is extremely difficult because there are a lot of other sports agents selling their players just as hard. So here's what we get today. Today's going to be a cool show because guess what? We got your guy on Zoom today. Mr. Bernie Lee is going to be on.
Bernie. And we excited.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me. It's so funny that you mentioned Jerry Maguire because 1,000% you've gotten to know Mike a little bit now. He is without a doubt Rod Tidwell.
Love it.
At that point, in his career, his wife was Regina King. They have that relationship, one of the most beautiful sports, in the context of sports, but just outside of the context of sports, husband wife relationship. She knew what everybody's role, jobs, motivations were. She read people before they said their last names, kind of thing. You can't beat Angela for anything, right?
She's a smart woman.
He had the cousin that always had something to say, Mike had like 3 different versions of those guys. You know what I mean? Like he was him to 1000%. Sometimes to the point where like, you know, Mike would like just talk and you would just have to sit there and listen and just wait for him to be done and then kind of make your point and then try and go to the plane real quick. So it wouldn't be like a back and forth.
Bro,
Like,
I know that feeling. Minus the plane. I know that feeling. I'm just going to be, there it is.
Yeah, I can.
This is good. I like this, Bernie. Let's keep this going.
You know, I was a little emotional person, and I think that, you know, it helped me. It was a blessing and a curse. And so he got to experience, you know, on both sides of it. He got to experience the good and he got to experience the ugly with me. And I just, you know, one question that I would love to ask you, Bernie, is since you've been in this business, what is your highlight of your career?
When you got back onto the Bulls, I would say, and I'm not just saying this because you're like sitting back in front of me or anything like that, but like for me, like me and you started working together your year in Toronto. So that was like getting to like the high of the high. You know, I was like 27 years old at that time. I think you were 31. And I remember that was like my first like entry point into doing like higher level NBA stuff. And I remember thinking like, cause you got traded to Toronto and we had a relationship, you end up living across the street from me, you know what I mean? And like, I'm watching it like through your eyes. And that was like a huge breakthrough for you, right? Like, I think the year before you had averaged a career high that was like, you know, 11, 12, 13, something like that. And now you're like, you had 1 month where you averaged like 32, like, you know what I mean?
You
and
averaged 32 in a month?
Yeah, no, he was killing. Like,
wow.
Yeah. And I remember thinking like, man, this is easy. Like this all you got to do as an agent. Like, shoot, like I do this every day, all day. Like this is all right. Go ahead, Mike. Like it was the easiest thing ever. And then Mike signs his contract with Minnesota, and like everything was just such a learning experience along that path. I remember he signs in Minnesota. We go to Minnesota. He's trying to find a house, everything like that. It's like that transition, like that first week. They just signed him to a pretty big 4-year deal. It was the biggest, you know, single deal for Mike's career. And everything was like copacetic. I don't know enough to know like there's how things change in the NBA, right? And I remember like we'd spent 3 days, like everybody blowing all kind of smoke up his butt, like everything, right? And Mike's way is like, he'll listen to what you're saying and then watch what you're doing. I'm at the point in my life where I'm only listening to what you're saying because I expect the best from everybody. Mike expects the grit from everybody, right? So I remember after 3 days of that, I'm thinking like, man, like they're going to retire his jersey here. Like, I wonder where they're going to put the statue. Like, Mike, you know what? Why don't we buy 2 houses? Like, we'll be in it forever, right? And I remember because as at the end of the third day, he's driving me to the airport so I could come back to Toronto. Where I live, and he dropped me off at the airport, and I was like, you know, I was gonna give him like that like rah moment. I turned him in the car. I'm like, man, you know, you got a good setup here. This is amazing. It's gonna be a great start. Great place for you. And he looked at me. He's like, well, that's what we're hoping. But if it isn't, we'll find another place. And in my head, I was like, what? Like, why would you be thinking like that?
It felt like a
just
literally.
Man, for 3 days, they literally had a smoke machine, just like take all this, Mike. Like, right? He wouldn't do it. And sure enough, you know, like over the course of that contract, that 4-year deal, Houston, New Orleans, Washington, and then we did a buyout from Washington. So 4 teams on 4 years, basically, right? And I remember he had this thing called the trade kicker in his contract, which means they trade you, they pay you a percentage of your remaining contract if they trade you, right? And they only paid out on the first trade. Mike got traded 3 times on that contract. So if they had paid it out repeatedly, like his side contract would have just been getting traded, right? Like it was like the first question I asked the PA, like, does a trade kicker pay out 2 times by any chance? Like, but I remember just that experience of watching that battle, like going from being in Toronto to where you feel like I'm gonna take a next step. He went to Minnesota. You know, he's going to play with Kim Garnett, and they were a team trying to build towards something, and for whatever reason, it just doesn't click. And we went through like this 4-year battle, and then I remember Mike did a buyout to leave Washington. It was that year in Washington where like everything that could go wrong did, you know what I mean? Like I can't even remember some of the stories. One of them involves a gun from Austin Powers, but we don't got to talk about that. Like, just like, if you can think of it, it happened, right? And it's Mike broke his finger 2 times. Mike had never missed 4 games in his NBA career, and breaks a finger on his hand the most, like, in practice 2 separate times within the span of 10 months. Like, just dumb, right? Like, and so it was time for him to get out of there. It's bad energy. We do a buyout for the day of the deadline. It was a buyout for $150,000. So at this point in my career, I'd been the guy, like, I'm gonna help you make money. I'd never told somebody, hey, give this money back. You know what I mean? Like, it's so foreign, right? So I get Mike to give back this $150,000, thinking we're gonna have him sign with a playoff team and go to the playoffs. And Miami was the team we were targeting. They signed Rafer Alston, so Mike didn't end up signing. And the next year he ended up playing in China. And I remember he went and he had to play in China, and that was how he was going to extend his career. And I remember going and visiting him in China, and it was this place that was like an hour and 20 minutes outside of Shanghai. And I remember sitting there, and like, we're at a Pizza Hut, because Pizza Hut in China, remember this, Mike, is like the 5-star like dining. Mike, you remember you were in China, right?
Oh, of course. Forget you.
Your memory's not so great. You were in China once. Okay?
Yeah. Long time ago. I got you. I'm with you.
Mike loved the hygiene in China, just so you know. He loved that. He talks about that.
We're sitting in a Pizza Hut, and we're ordering from the menu. The way you order in menus in China is you just point at the pictures. You know what I mean? Like, literally, Pizza Hut's 5-star dining. I remember just like thinking with Mike, like, man, like, these last 3 years have gone by like that. Now we're sitting in China. Like, how did this happen? Mike plays in China, and he still had that passion. Like, he worked so hard to get his career. You couldn't even say the words like end his career at that point in his life. Like, you couldn't say the word retire around Mike or anything like that.
Mike's had like 12 endings to his career, hasn't he? He's never ended. He just keeps going and going, right?
Oh man, he had a plan for himself that other people maybe didn't see or anything, but that's the way it had always been. And especially at this point, right? Because I think, like, as an NBA player, especially when you get there the long way, everybody else expects you just to be happy about the fact that you got there, but they don't understand. I learned this through Mike. He always expected to get there. And he not only get there, it's like, well, once I'm here, why can't I have what everybody else has? I'm going to work just as hard as these people. I have the same advantages, disadvantages. Like, if it's about competing, let's make it about competing. I'll compete against anybody, right? So I remember like leaving that China trip and coming back and thinking to myself, like, man, I don't know. I know Mike really wanted to get back into the league. I didn't know like what was next for him or anything like that, and how it was going to necessarily happen. So the next year comes, and this was like before other guys did it. Mike was the first guy that did this. It hit a point where it's like, you go back to China, you go do this, whatever. He wanted to get back in the league. So the conversation I had to have with him, I had a media person suggested to me that I really respected. We're like, if you want to get Mike back into the league, you got to have him play in the D League, and people are going to have to see it, right? See it in person. And I remember I told Mike this, and we had a great relationship. Like, we would bump heads, whatever. But I told Mike this. I'm like, Mike, this is what I'm thinking. And he hung up the phone on me. He hung up the phone on me as we were talking and didn't talk to me for 4 days. and I knew, like, because again, I'm telling him, like, the last 14 years of your life, you feel like all the things you've earned and contributed, whatever, from the ground zero you start at, because his starting is nuts. Like, he got into the NBA by playing in Ed Pinckney Summer League. And Mike, like Pat Riley now, because of like Jimmy being the franchise guy, like, I get the best of the best from Pat now. Like, he's like, my buddy, because Jimmy's like so good. The number one story that we talk about is you and you doing this and you getting in through, Ed's like summer league. So my point, like, Mike did all that to get into the NBA. He earns his spot. He hits the highs and, has at that point, I think it was maybe like an 11-year career in the league. And I'm telling him now, at the end of all this, you got to go right back to square one if you want to keep going. And it was just like, it was a tough thing to accept, but we had the relationship that, for me, I knew he deserved and earned the truth from me. So even if it hurt to have to tell him that, it's what had to be done. It's what the truth was. Truth is the truth is the truth.
And
right?
That's part of what agent does. An agent has to speak truth to them, right? That's no one else is sometimes, right?
Yeah, and it's hard because, like, sometimes as an agent, like when I was younger in my career, and now I realize what my role actually is. But when you're young in your career, you just want to be the person that tells people all good news. You know what I mean? And like, because it's an aspect of life. Like you want to live people's dreams with them when their dreams are going according to their dreams. You don't want to be the one that's telling them like, you know what, we have an alteration from what you were planning. So I told Mike that. I was like, I think you got to play in the G League. Like this will be your way back. And I'm saying this to him like I believe it, but I don't know it because nobody had ever done it before. There hadn't been a 10-year NBA guy that was like, all right, I'm gonna go play against these D League guys and really. So he hung up the phone on me. He didn't talk to me for 4 days. I gave him his space. We were at a point, like at that point in our lives, like I talked to Mike 20 times a day for the better part of like 8 years. So going 4 days without talking to him was kind of like a weird like breakup. Like, and it's before Instagram and stuff. So I really don't know what he's doing. Like I couldn't cyber stalk him, right? So I'm just like waiting. And on the 4th day, instead of him calling me, Angela calls me, his wife. And she says, okay, he's going to do it. And I was like, oh, perfect. Like, me and Mike don't ever have to talk about this because partly I'm scared he might punch me, right? So he goes, he does it, he plays it. He plays 2 games with
Erie Bayhawks.
Was that Erie, the first one?
And we were friends during this time.
2 games with Erie before they go to the showcase. The G League showcase used to be in Reno. We go into Reno, and he plays games at the he plays games in the D League showcase for Erie. He plays like 2 of them, kills. I leave after the second one, thinking he's going back to Erie. I'm flying back to Toronto. We're gonna figure it out, right? He had a really good first game, and okay second one. As I'm in the air, the Chicago Bulls, Derrick Rose. It was the year after he was MVP. And it was the lockout year, so it was a compressed schedule. And he kept having like these little nagging injuries. Like one day he'd wake up, his toe was messed up. One day he'd have a stiff neck, like all these things. So as I was in the air flying back from Reno to Toronto, Chicago calls up Mike because he had played for Tom Thibodeau and basically every other coach in the league, right? At some point, but they wanted to call up Mike. They were trying to call me, but they couldn't reach me because I was on a plane. So when I landed to the messages of like, hey, we got Mike coming back, right? We're gonna have Mike come to the Bulls, and that like I didn't know it was gonna happen. Like I wanted it to happen, like with my whole heart, everything, right? I remember standing on a plane. So you get up on a plane and you wait, like everybody stands up, like you're going somewhere, but you really like you're lining up for nothing. So I stand up because I want to run off this plane, right? Because I want to track him down. I want to do something, and it takes like another 15 minutes, everybody get your bags, get off the plane. I run off the plane. I'm so excited. I don't know what to do next, right? I left my damn iPad on the plane, right? And Mike, I'm going to tell you this now. I called you as like you were there. I was like, hey, man, I'm so excited for you. Like literally got tears in my eyes. Like, man, you did it. Man, I left my iPad on the plane though. He was so excited. Beautiful thing about Mike, love him to death. Like he's kind of cheap sometimes, right? So he says to me, he was like, man, don't even worry about the iPad. He's like, I'm gonna get you a new one. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I never got the iPad, Mike.
Oh, hey, Bernie, I don't remember that story. And I'm holding to it.
No, I'm messing with you.
Bernie, I got an iPad for you. Don't you worry.
Then Mike goes to the Bulls, and plays, rest of that season with the Bulls and everything. But that to me, like even now, like that was, I don't even know how many years ago that was. My career is like done different things or whatever. But like that moment to me was like so like just satisfying from the standpoint of like understanding that if you create like a basis and process and you control what you can control, and then you work and you hope for the best and you make all those calls and you do all those things, that sometimes the right things do happen. You know what I mean? And it was just like that was amazing. And then it's funny, the way life works. Like Mike ends up on that team, and one of the rookies on the team is Jimmy. Is Jimmy Butler. And Jimmy's like the 15th man on that team. Like everything, you know what I mean? Like nobody really knows he's going to become what he. But it's just the way like that life and business and NBA works. You know what I mean? So yeah, by far that was probably the most satisfying day of my career, I would say.
That's absolutely amazing, Bernie. Wow, man. I feel like I've hung out with 2 really good friends, and they told some good stories about each other. This is powerful stuff here.